And the same goes for all concepts. What's beautiful, he said, changes according to each individual, but there must be a genuine, perfect beauty that exists only as a concept. Plato's point is that the world we see is an imperfect copy of a conceptual world that is accessible only to those people who are prepared to dedicate their lives to contemplation and philosophy. Now, for 10 years, Aristotle was assumed to be Plato's most brilliant student, but then in 347 BC, Plato died, and it's clear that there had been a break between the ideas of the two men, because then Aristotle was passed over for the job of taking over the academy.
He found it impossible to go along with the idea that the most important things in the universe were things that aren't there. Nothing can exist only in its form without being attached to anything, he said. Things like beauty can't exist without an actual object to exist in. You can have a beautiful bed or a beautiful cat or beautiful flowers, but you can't just have beauty.
Aristotle got quite stroppy about this, saying,
"So, goodbye to Plato's forms, for they are no more meaningful than singing la la la."
Aristotle's turn to studying things as they really are led to his philosophical exile from Athens. Now, it might seem as if all this arguing is about nothing. This would be the attitude of my parents' generation. If Plato had asked them, why is that a bed, they'd have said, because it is. But then if they were asked, where are the pyramids, they'd say, where you bloody well left them.
once Aristotle had broken against the notion that the mechanics of the universe are beyond our comprehension, he was able to pursue an understanding of every aspect of the world around him. He spent the next years in Asia Minor studying and categorising 500 species of animal,
analysing the different systems of government, developing theories on how the planets work, and compiling a list of Olympic champions. But then the city he was teaching in was overrun by Persians, and Aristotle immediately fled. So what did the Persians do then to make Aristotle give up teaching? Maybe they put Ofsted inspectors at the back of the classroom with a spear and a clipboard taking notes, then sold off the Olympic training fields, introduced a compulsory slavery hour, and then said, I can't understand it. We don't seem to be recruiting any teachers. Aristotle went to the city of Mytilene to teach a class that included the future Alexander the Great.
Aristotle then returned to Athens to set up his own school, the Lyceum, on this site, apparently in opposition to the academy. So presumably then some parents were saying, I know the Lyceum's right over the other side of the Parthenon, but it does have a very good reputation. And then blocked up the roads every morning by taking their kids there on 20-foot wide horses.
Aristotle's lecture style was to conduct his lessons while he was walking around and outside the building, which must have caused havoc. Aristotle did 2 sets of lectures most days. The first was a detailed session for his students, and in the evening he did a simpler version for the public. So that in itself was a break from Plato's belief that the public were ignorant and unworthy. To show that you can't necessarily tell what something is just by relying on your senses, Aristotle did an experiment in which he took 2 vessels, one containing white liquid and one black liquid. Drop by drop he put the black liquid into the white liquid, but obviously the colour didn't appear to change until there were several drops of black liquid in it. Up to that point the white liquid appeared to be exactly the same as before, but in fact it wasn't. He concluded that everything is in a state of constant change, which led him back to the problem, what is it about something that makes it what it is? Is an apple still an apple while it's decomposing? When is an organisation no longer the one it once was? When is something not what it was before?
I went to see the Four Tops once and none of the original members were in the band. They were just session musicians. So, have I seen the four tops or not? I don't know. Aristotle's answer was that everything contains an essence, its driving force that remains unchanged and propels it through its journey from beginning to end.
A person may change in appearance or size, but there is something which remains essentially them throughout. For example, to pick someone at random, Noel Edmonds. First he was on the radio, then on the telly, then just in papers, and now back on the radio again. But throughout he remains in essence a deeply nauseating tosser.
Welcome to the House of Fun!
Aristotle fitted these ideas into his science. Free from the view that everything was an imitation of a godly concept, he could analyse the material world and seek each body's essence. So he worked out that everything was made up of four elements: fire and air, whose essence was taking them on a natural journey upwards towards the sky, and earth and water, whose essence was taking them towards the ground.
He worked out from dissecting chickens that the heart was the central organ of the body. He analysed money, concluding that it works because it relates to an amount of labour that's been spent on the thing it's buying, an early form of Marx's labour theory of value.
Few things can be more obvious than the fact that Marx was wrong.
But Aristotle could only develop his scientific theories because he was prepared to challenge the idea that certain bodies are beyond comprehension. So Aristotle, as well as using his methods to explain the natural world and astronomy, devoted a large part of his studies to what he called ethics. Here he tried to show how human beings could be, as he put it, virtuous, prudent and magnanimous. Sometimes the translation is a little awkward. For example, there's a whole chapter on people who behave in an antisocial way.
But the word he uses to describe this is incontinence. At one point he says,
The incontinent man does wrong because he feels like it.
A lot of the book is concerned with friendship. To find the ideal way to behave, he said, in ethics, meant searching for what he called the golden mean. In every area of behaviour, he said, there are
3 dispositions, 2 of them vicious and 1 good, the mean.
every virtue, he said, was the middle way between 2 vices. So in the middle of the book is a table laying this out. Under conversation is on one side buffoonery, on the other side boorishness, and in the middle wittiness is just right. But some of them are a bit obvious. For example, ambition. You can have over-ambition, unambitious, or proper ambition. Anyone can do that. You might as well have porridge. Too hot, too cold, or just right. Nevertheless, he'd written the world's first self-help book.
One point made by the ethics, which Aristotle himself possibly didn't see, is that what is considered acceptable behaviour depends to some extent on your social position. It condemns the decadence of the rich as licentiousness and says,
It's not easy for a liberal man to be rich, since he is neither acquisitive nor retentive of money.
Aristotle seems to have grasped the nature of the rich. In Ethics, he gives an example of how a business deal can end up.
Dionysius I promised to pay a fee to a harpist. The better he played, the higher the fee would be. But the next morning the harpist asked for his money, and Dionysius replied that he had already paid him by giving him the pleasure of anticipating the money.
Aristotle was contemptuous of wealthy decadence, but nor did he have much time for the typical ways of the poor. Of labourers, he said,
Their way of life is despicable, and there is no room for excellence in any occupation to which people of that sort put their hands.
Even better, in the middle of all this complex philosophy, he says,
But a man can scarcely be happy if he is ugly.
So there was a thread running through his ideas. Everything and everyone contains an essence that drives it, him or her. So we can analyse the world, the stars, human behaviour, animals, the winner of the 4x400 metres relay, but we can't do much to change any of them, because everything and everyone is carrying out its role destined to it by nature. And for Aristotle in Athens, the layer of society that seemed to be the most naturally worthy were the small farmers and poorest citizens. Aristotle's wish for moderate behaviour between 2 undesirable extremes is, I think, a reflection of how he sees the ideal people as this middle and supposedly moderate layer. That is why he was appealing to the people of Athens to behave in a moderate way. And these people needed a code, because there were law courts but no written laws. That poor harpist couldn't take Dionysius to the small claims court. There weren't people wandering through the streets of Athens going, "Excuse me, have you suffered an injury in the last 12 months? The ethics was an attempt to provide a moral and legal code for the middle order.